Want to watch this episode? We're on YouTube. Just search Katie Prentiss or hit the link in the show notes. I'm Katie Prentiss, and this is Sunshine Soul. I remember flying out of Portland one gray morning. It had been raining for days. That kind of heavy, wet Pacific Northwest gray that just seeps into your bones. I had the window seat on the plane like always. And as we ascended, I watched the droplets race across the glass. The clouds outside were so thick, like walls. And for a moment, it felt like the sun just didn't even exist anymore. And then we broke through. Probably my favorite moment. The clouds fell away, and there it was, blue sky, bright light, the sun just sitting there like it had been the whole time. And it hit me in that moment. The sun is always shining, even when we can't see it. Here at Sunshine Soul, we hope, we heal, and we love despite the clouds. We remember that there's light ahead. Welcome to Sunshine Soul. Let's keep looking for the light together. Episode 8, Story Swapping Saves Us. All right, here we are, episode 8. We started with my mom, and I want to dive a little deeper into her journey in her last years and her diagnosis with the emphasis of our stories matter. And I'll get to that part. Like I said in episode 1, we lost my mom in 2016 to frontotemporal dementia. FTD is such a unique little bitch. It's such a brutal disease to watch take hold of somebody's life. And I want to share more about that because it's so important and integral to my story and how I've gotten to where I am today. My mom was officially diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia when she was 62. At that point in our lives, we had no idea what was going on, and she was already living with my sister. They were her full-time caregiver because we knew that something was way off. We think that she probably had FTD as early as her 50s, maybe even before that. We don't know. For the longest time, I really hoped that my mom's mental decline related to her car accident where she had a head injury. But the neurologist at the diagnosis said that he didn't see any specific brain damage that would be effective toward FTD, which is just like mind-boggling to me that someone can have a head injury in the exact location as frontotemporal dementia. I was like, even at that time when we got that diagnosis, I was like, okay, this is how deep I was with understanding. I'm like, my mom has dementia and it's located in her frontotemporal lobe, which is kind of accurate and way off at the same time. So fast forward, my sister had her live with them for 3 years. I've shared some of this previously, but I want to share more about moving mom in with us and what that journey was like for us. Mom came into our household. We had 4 young children at this point. I think our oldest was in middle school, then 3 kids in elementary. It was a lot to juggle. Mom came to our house and I wasn't fully aware of how progressed her needs were at the point of her moving in with us. It wasn't long before I realized that we had incontinence issues. We had to deal with that. That was just, wow, what a mind game to be a child and having to deal with, incontinence issues in your parents. It's just a challenging role reversal. My mom was fairly nonverbal at this point. My mom had a type of FTD called primary progressive aphasia, it's PPA. And what that means is that one of the primary presenting issues is the loss of ability to speak. And I knew at that point FTD affected compulsion control, personality, speech, but I didn't really understand more than that. I just knew that we had a mother in my house that felt very nonverbal. It felt like having perhaps like an adult, severely autistic person living with us. My mom definitely had compulsion control issues. She was very fixated on food and beverages. I would find her grazing in the pantry often. We would find her drinking every beverage she could get her hands on. Literally, if someone set a drink on the counter, she would come behind and start guzzling it. She would have it gone before you could even turn around and notice. One of the moments we realized we probably needed to invest in some sort of fridge that could lock, because if we had milk, if we had juice, if we had any kind of beverages, they would be gone. My mom came to dinner one night, and I knew that all of our beverages were in the fridge, and our family drinks a lot of water. I was really trying to encourage my mom to drink a lot of water because I knew that would be better for her. And she came to table with a full glass of what looked like milk. And as she was carrying it and it was swishing in within the glass, I noticed it was really thick. And I said to her, I was like, Mom, what are you drinking right now? And she looked at me with almost a panicked look and just started downing the drink. And I realized as she was almost done that she was downing a full glass of half and half that I had had for coffee in the house. So you can see how it's comical in a way, but also a health risk. No one should be drinking a full glass of half and half with their dinner. It's complicated. It's frustrating. I found myself reacting in anger toward some of her behaviors, and then would be so mad at myself for having that response, like she can help it or something. It was confusing, wanting comfort from the very person that I was caring for. We were able, because of the sale of her house, we were able to afford having some caregivers come into our house in those early months. And it was a lifeline. I was trying to run my business. We were needing to take care of our kids. Brian was working full time, and we couldn't watch my mom all day long. And so the ability to bring some really kind, amazing people into our home to be with her was phenomenal. And still, we had so many incidents that happened where we left her one day for probably a 20-minute errand, and she left the house and wandered and ended up at our house front steps with the cops present by the time we got home. There was incidents where, she was trying to make a sandwich for my child, and they said they wanted something different. I don't remember the circumstances, but they grabbed her hand to try to get her to stop because she couldn't communicate, and she jerked her hand away with the knife. And I remember watching that and thinking, oh my God, she could have cut my child with the knife. So there was all these incidents that were happening where things were becoming more extreme and more stressful and more difficult to handle. She would wander around at night. I just didn't know how far it would get. And our family was really at our end. You could see the kids not knowing how to deal with their own frustrations over mom's behaviors, really just not knowing how to care for her best. We ended up in the ER through extreme circumstances. I had asked one of our caregivers to take mom into just, even an urgent care, but can you just go into one of those clinics and get her lungs checked out, because I felt like my mom was maybe needing to cough, but because of her nonverbal, she couldn't express whether she felt anything in her chest. And I said, can you just have a doctor listen to her chest and make sure there's not any massive congestion happening in there? And our caregiver took her to an urgent care center, and the doctor there had no idea what FTD was or anything about the symptoms mom was exhibiting, and was convinced that my mother had had a stroke. In that moment, he was very alarmed and told the caregiver that they needed to take my mom to the ER immediately. And the caregiver was like, well, can you just check her lungs and make sure that there's not congestion? And the doctor was like, the lungs are the last of your concern. She's had a stroke and this is urgent. I think she's had a stroke and this is urgent, something like that. And next thing I knew, I was like, had a full packed day of work and errands and things that I needed to do. I was very thankful that mom could be with the caregiver that day. And next thing I knew, I was sitting in an ER and I was watching my mom in this bed. I remember thinking, I don't think she's had a stroke. I think she just looks like she's someone who's had a stroke. She's nonverbal. She can't communicate. Like, of course, she seems like she's had a stroke. But at the same time, I was terrified that maybe she had, and maybe we missed something, and maybe there was something more. And I don't want to be a person who causes more harm or damage to my mom. So, of course, we took her. And I'm sitting in the ER, cleared everything from my day. And that ER doctor asked us, like, I remember him saying to me, "What do you think has happened?" And I said, "I don't think that she had a stroke." And he basically, after running some tests and making sure everything was in the clear, he encouraged me to be able to trust my instincts with mom. And he questioned who the urgent care doctor was as well. But that moment ended up being like a surprise lifeline for us, because the ER doctor referred us to a program that would take mom in and provide social work, a nurse, and a doctor to oversee her care during the next number of years of her decline. I felt so helped. I felt so cared for by this doctor intervening in the way he did. The fact that he asked me, "Could I have your number and refer you to a nurse," rather than just handing me a brochure or telling me to look something up. He gave my information to this program. And the next thing I knew, this social worker was calling me on my phone and asking me how I was. I remember sitting in my car getting that call and just breaking down. I was like in tears, like baffled and feeling so supported that someone would call to check on me to see if they could support mom. The good thing about this program is it was a spend down program where like we could spend the rest of mom's cash and then she could get on Medicare and Medicaid and the state would take over to provide for her, which also answered another issue of complete overwhelm. How are we going to ever afford anything? My mom had a tiny little home in Georgia that we sold for a small amount of cash, and it was shocking to think about how quickly that would go, within a year or two. All of that money that my mom would have been able to live on through her older years was now just like going out the window so rapidly. So this program was phenomenal. We got mom the care, but we had to make the really difficult choice to move her into a nursing home. When we moved her in that day, honestly, that moment I will never forget. It was the hardest moment in the journey. It was one of the hardest moments in my journey with my mom, is moving her into this room and having to say goodbye. And I remember feeling like this is like trying to drop off an autistic kindergarten child into a dorm room that has no idea why they're there. They have no idea like why you're leaving or what you're doing, or at least it feels like they don't know. You don't really know what their mind is actually perceiving. It's kind of scarier to think they do know and aren't able to express. There's no winning in the situation, but leaving mom there that night was a really difficult moment for me. I tried to soothe myself by giving her, new bedding and cute decor in the room, but it didn't make a difference. My mom stood out like a sore thumb in this home because she's in her young 60s, vibrant looking physically, with all of these people who are in their 70s, 80s, and even older, which is fine, but difficult to watch and just a visual cue that things weren't as they should be. My mom, during those years, actually, my mom did not last at this facility very long at all. It was not quite the appropriate fit for her, and she needed memory care, and she was in a more traditional nursing home. I would go there and residents would be mad because they'd come and complain to me that my mom wouldn't talk to them. they'd come and complain to me that my mom would steal sodas from their room. Eventually, the workers would talk about her being physical with them, and I was super confused by that because my mom wasn't angry or aggressive. My mom would pack up her things and say that her brother, Pete, was coming to pick her up in the parking lot. My mom would try to leave repeatedly. I was terrified that we wouldn't be able to find a place that would fit her needs. We were told that she couldn't stay there any longer, that she needed to find a different place. And I was terrified that she would be labeled as aggressive or difficult or something like that. But we did eventually find a memory care home to move her into. And I remember talking to them and feeling so scared to admit some of the things that Mom had been doing. And I said, my mom takes things from other people's rooms. And the woman was like, oh, yeah, we have our resident shoppers. And I was like, what? Shoppers? Okay. And then I was like, my mom is nonverbal. And she's like, no, I understand that. And she told me there's like also bed surfers. And it was just all these behaviors that were more normalized in a memory care unit. And we'd go to visit her there and someone, a different resident would be asleep in the chair of her room. And my mom would not like that. My mom would walk up to them and say, move. Just with like the one word she could mutter, she would say, move. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so mean. But I also would notice, all the things that I had done to try to create some form of happiness or comfort in the situation, like buying her new bedding and buying her little decor, would slowly like leave her room and new things would come in and her bedding would change. And her photos, I visited one time and there was a photo by her bed of a woman holding the son, a child. And I was like, Mom, who is this? And she looked and was like, I don't know. And I thought, oh, okay. So there's some sort of comfort for her in like having this photo by her bed. And she probably thinks it's her family, but it's somebody else's. It's a lot. It's a lot to process. I tell this story right now and I think, why didn't I try to get her bedding back? Or why didn't I try to like find her things? But it was just so much crisis and grief and trauma to even realize what to do. I would be there trying to think about, here I am in my life where it's super fast paced and I'm managing so many people and so many things. And I'd come to her room and it would scream to a halt. And it felt like running into the brick wall of grief, just facing everything that was reality with her there. One of the things that got me through that time was sharing little tiny snippets, bits and pieces on social media. I remember feeling so alone. I remember feeling like nobody really understands what this is like. I would tell people my mom has dementia, and they would start to tell me about their grandma who had it, which is really nice and is obviously a way of trying to connect. But in that sharing, I would feel even more alone because I'm like, no, you don't understand. My mom is 62. My mom is 64. My mom is young. So I would start to share a little bit about her and I'd call it the slow goodbye of like watching the person that you love slowly fade. They're sitting right in front of you. You can still feel their physical self next to you, but their presence, their ability to connect with you is fading constantly. And I would share something about it or share a photo and I would say like dementia sucks and a hashtag or something like that. And people would connect. Somebody would say, oh my gosh, yes, me too. And I'd look at their page and see that their story was similar. And it started to make me realize like sharing our specific stories in life is a way to heal, is a way to connect and find community. So I was still feeling isolated, guilty, exhausted. I was losing the ability to feel like my mom is herself. I was doing everything I could to connect with her, bringing Elliot in, my youngest, to give her a million hugs in a row when we were there. I was doing things like nail salon with me and Abby and her. I would read aloud a book. I remember reading Cheryl Strayed Wild to my mom and thinking this will be something really nurturing that we can do together. And sometimes in the middle of just reading the first paragraph or two, my mom would just get up and wander out. There was this moment where I was close to her and my hair fell into my face a little bit. And she looked at me and reached up and gently moved my hair out of my face. And it struck me so profoundly, like, oh my gosh, that felt like a nurturing mother thing to do. And I remember on purpose, like making it fall back down to see if she would do it again. And she reached her hand up and she did. Oh, there was more of those little moments of connection that just healed me through it all. It helped me remember if I can just stay present, if I can just look for her in this moment, I will see her and get to be with her. There were moments where I'd walk in the room and I could see that she knew exactly who I was. And it was such a gift to have those things in the midst of those times. I think after losing mom, and I think my thought is anytime we lose someone close to us, it's a pretty natural thing to fear dying in that same way. It's like we fear the grief and trauma that we've been exposed to. And I definitely felt that from the get-go. Like if I couldn't remember something or if I get my words twisted up, I would think, oh God, I hope I don't get this. I don't want to get this. Creating my first film, Front Porches, was a way for me to process some of my grief and pain and the whole confusion of it all. But even in that, sharing that story, there was still so much about FTD that I hadn't unpacked. After making that film, I connected with the AFTD, the Association of Frontotemporal Dementia, a beautiful organization that helps educate families and friends of people with FTD. I connected with a podcast called Remember Me, where Rachel and Maria are also children of parents with FTD and have experienced a similar loss. They invited me onto their podcast to get to share my story about mom. In a way, I was learning more about FTD. My world of connecting with folks in this corner of the world was opening up. I was learning more. Unfortunately, I learned that there are aspects of FTD that can be genetic, but I think at this point in my life, I would convince myself as a self-protective way that what my mom had, her FTD, there's no way it's genetic because, she had that head injury and I'm sure it was just a one-off. We don't know of any other type of dementia in our family like this. I started working through some of that fear, but it was still always present. And then it brings me to this moment of telling my story in deeper ways. I remember sharing, so I'm learning more about FTD. I'm learning more about how sharing our stories impact each other in really good ways. I'm connecting with more and more people in this world and in this type of grief. And I realized that the culmination of all of these things led me to a deep conviction that I needed to create my first full-length movie around this topic. I knew that I wanted to do this. I knew that my work so far had touched a nerve. People were still reaching out to me, wanting to connect, wanting to share their stories, their journeys. And I wanted to give back to this community. And I thought, short films are great. They're really helpful. They're digestible, whatever, but they don't get viewed in the same way that full-length movies do. I wanted to create something that could land itself in theaters and in living rooms into homes so that people could be exposed who weren't looking for information about this disease. People could be exposed to caregiving journey. It took me a really long time to figure out how to make this movie because I had a lot of resistance. I had this resistance of, why would we make a full-length movie about dementia? It's so depressing. We know where the ending goes. It's not happy. It's depressing. I want to do something that brings hope and healing. But as I kept thinking about this story and how I could create it in ways I could make it different than any dementia film that I had seen, I finally came upon this idea of how I would end it. And once I figured out that ending, which I feel like is this beautiful gift to all of us who have experienced this type of grief, the story just completely opened up. I wrote this feature film that is called Wake Up Maggie. And I wrote this film 2.5 years ago. I spent an entire year writing this script, writing it, revising it. Anne Lamott has a book called Bird by Bird that she talks about how to write. And she always says, write a shitty first draft. And hearing that gave me so much permission to just dive in and write. It doesn't have to be good. You just have to get it on paper. So I wrote this full-length film, Wake Up Maggie, in what year is it now? I wrote it in all of 2023. In 2024, I hit the ground running. I was like, I am going to make this movie. It's beautiful. It's my mission at this point. I'm working hard. My head is down. I'm focused like I've never been focused before. But even as I'm working on it, I felt this shadow behind me, this FTD fear shadow behind me of, what if you get this? I was hyperfixated every time I would stumble on a word, hyperfixated fear. Every time I would forget something, hyperfixated fear. I would find my throat drying up as I'm talking, hyperfixated fear. I'm going to get primary progressive aphasia. I'm going to lose my ability to speak. It happened to my mom really young. I'm going to get it. And then in the midst of that, we find out that my mother's younger brother gets diagnosed with the same thing. In the middle of me fearing it, in the middle of me trying to deny that there's probably a genetic component for us, her younger brother gets it. I'm devastated by that news. My siblings, my cousins were all like, oh, no. It's not what you want to hear. It's not at all what you want to hear. There is genetic testing you can do with FTD that I am definitely open to exploring after I get this movie made. But it's interesting thinking like, oh, there's an ability to know whether you have it or not. As this fear shadow is lurking behind me, as I'm just deep diving into this work, creating this movie that I think will be this gift back to my experience and so many of ours experience, that I think will bring hope and healing, that I think will have social impact and hopefully promote more research, a cure, more support for caregivers and families with this or anything like this in their experience. As I'm ingrained in all of this, and as this reality happens with my Uncle Pete, I realize I've got to get a grip. I can't keep living like feeling this shadow behind me and like having my nervous system respond to everything so intensely. And so I asked myself the question, what would you do if you knew you had it? Let's just settle this. So let's just say for sure you have FTD in your genetics. This is in your future at some point or another. What would you do? And the answer was so clear. It was, okay, I'd keep living my life the way I'm already living, where I'm trying to eat well, live well, move a lot, pursuing my own health. I would keep loving my family and trying to stay present with friends and family that are in my life right now to give them everything that I can give them. And I would make this movie. I would make Wake Up Maggie. It was a deep breath. It was like the subtle fading of the shadow. It was the ability to settle in the midst of it and to lean in. And at that point, answering that question made me realize this is my calling. This is my mission. None of us are guaranteed what tomorrow holds. None of us know what our journey is going to look like, what our path is going to unfold to. We don't know what we might be wrestling with tomorrow. We don't know if we're going to get sick, if somebody we love is going to get sick. We don't know if we're going to be a caregiver or need a caregiver. But all of that is almost guaranteed for all of us. So when I think about contracting and expanding, and I think about all those years where I spent like being smaller or being more focused on my kids, or those years I spent contracting my life in so that I could give caregiving to my mom, is a sacrificial love. It's a journey of sacrificial love. Right now, my life I'm experiencing expansion in a lot of ways. I'm experiencing more freedom with time. I have less kids at home to take care of, even though that makes me cry sometimes. It's still a freedom. It's still an expansion. And I'm expanding into this calling and mission of making Wake Up Maggie, this movie that I just know is going to have a deep impact. Even while I'm doing it, I think, what if I lose my ability to speak? As I'm doing this movie, I'm getting opportunities. Like a friend of mine who actually came on to Wake Up Maggie as a producer, Michelle Glogovac, invited me onto her podcast. As we were talking on her podcast, she realizes she wants to come and help the production of Wake Up Maggie. She helps book me on, 17 different podcasts. As I keep telling my story on these different podcasts, I'm like, maybe I should share this story myself somewhere. And I start getting advice. How can I make a podcast? What should I do? I want to bring people in to share their stories that reflect some of the journey that I've been on, some of the unraveling that I've been able to do. And as I start putting questions out there to get advice, this lovely human, Lindsay Guentzel, comes on and says she wants to help produce this podcast. And the number one advice I get before, when people say, like, if you want to make a podcast, the first season you should do is sharing your own story. And I'm like, but I don't want to do that. I want to bring other people on. I want to ask them questions. I want to give other people a place to shine and share their stories. But I start thinking, well, maybe I should share my story. I've shared little bits and pieces of it here and there on podcasts and social media posts and captions and whatnot. But I promise you, it has made me so uncomfortable, like thinking about, does my story matter? Does anyone care? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like a really normal person. I feel like a relatively happy person despite it all. But then I think, no, this is what we do. We tell our stories so that we feel more human. We tell our stories that we feel more connected. We share our stories so we feel less alone. Storytelling is, for me, leaning into the very fears that I have, the risks that I feel, fear of rejection. But it's also this like leaning into what I feel like is my calling, my mission, to use my voice while I still have it, right? And to get to share my own story. We talk in this podcast how the sun is always shining despite the clouds. There was a moment I was leaving mom's memory care unit, and it was always hard to go. It was always hard to leave. Neither one of those steps, walking in the door and out, were easy for me. But I remember turning the corner of these stairs, and there was a window facing this courtyard and garden. And out of it was gray sky with a tiny little sunbreak and a gorgeous rainbow. And I remember feeling like that moment was for me. That was a tiny gift in the midst of this heavy weight. And that's what I hope that this podcast can be, a little sunbreak in the midst of gray. If you're experiencing gray clouds right now, I hope you can look for the sun. And if you don't see it, I hope you can remember that it's still shining anyway. And if you're in the midst of sun, I hope that you can just enjoy it, smile, reflect it outward to other people. That's what we get to do, whether we're contrasted or expanded or wherever we are in our journey, we get to reflect back the sun. Thank you. If you've hung in there with us this far, I appreciate you for listening, and I can't wait to share more with you. To learn more about Wake Up Maggie, visit wakeupmaggiemovie.com. This episode was brought to you by yours truly, Katie Prentiss. Produced and edited by the fabulous Lindsay Guentzel. Our incredible Sunshine Soul theme music was created by the one and only Adam Sweeney. For more resources and transcripts, visit katieprentiss.com. That's Katie, Katie, Prentiss, Prentiss.com.